Hello again. So this is video 3, sort of like a strange book report on this book, The Secret History of the World, which is essentially the reporting of what has supposedly happened within secret societies and mystery schools in human history. What was their point? What was their purpose? What was their function in our societies? Because I am trying to understand. My basic position is that if I understand consciousness, and I understand, or I'm pretty freaking certain that for the most part humanity has missed the point, what is the fucking point? And why are we missing it? What is the function of our societies that should have caught this crap, and instead we've missed it and we've ended up where we are today? So I don't have a judgment on whether or not secret societies are a thing. I'm sure plenty of people will have an opinion on that. It's not my goals have nothing to do with whether or not they exist. My goals have nothing to do with what their function is. I don't have any role in judging their function or their actions. I have given the basics on this. I have given a plea to people who may or may not exist within these societies. And now I want to talk about, let's make some progress on the actual work, okay? And I'm going to do that by starting with magic. See, in these societies, according to this book, magic has played a major role, and it plays a diminished role as time moves on because we go from a idealism as the basics for our understandings of our universe to a materialistic or materialism view of understanding our universe. Going to be more materialistic is great for progress. It advances our science, it advances our math, it advances our economies, which is a little bit funny, but it also takes. See, the difference between idealism and materialism is that mind before matter problem. If idealism is the way the universe works, then ideas themselves are more real than the material in which you interact with your universe. The ideas are what's real. The ideas are what matters. The ideas are what drives our future. Whereas, materialistically speaking, if you look at it from a materialism's perspective, the things we use, how we utilize them, how our money and how it's used, our land, our real estate, and how it's used. For the most part, the materialism view seems to say it is all about that money, because that is the deciding factor in how everything materialistically gets used. Either it's successful, which makes it more money and allows it to do more things, or it's unsuccessful and it costs and it does less things. But these guys lived in a world that started, their history is ancient. So their histories include magic. Now when I think about magic, because I've grown up in a fully materialistic world, I've grown up in a world where magic is clearly not an obvious thing. It does not really exist in the world. It's fiction. But they grew up in a world that was not materialistically hardened. Their history begins from a vantage point of more idealistic existence. So for them, in their history, it existed. It was a real factor to be counted into every plan you made. Magic was a thing. If it was a thing, and the world has changed or hardened in their perspective into a world where it's not really a thing, but that's not how things work. Even laws of thermodynamics say that's not how things work. If a thing was and has now diminished, what has it become? If there really was magic, what has it become? See, when you think magic, let's use the most widely recognizable thing is Harry Potter. Okay, Harry Potter to me is, well, for one thing, I love the stories. I've read the books countless times, and I read a lot while I'm working, so I have all the time in the world to read whatever the hell I want. And I live in a world where anything I could want to read is a button's push away for me. But she has some great writing, and much like psychology, has left something for our societies to build on, which is terminology. Yes, to me, psychology boils down to, well, thanks for the terminology, you're now irrelevant. But we're talking about magic. We're not talking about that. Okay. So magic, I'm going to use some terminology from Harry Potter. Let's talk about transfiguration. If I have a magic wand and I want to transfigure something, whether it be by swish and flick or by the words I use, I have to interact with the molecular basics of that object. We understand what electrons are. We understand what molecules are. We don't understand them quite the way you might be thinking because our representational models are far more accurate than what we can actually see through our technology shows us. But we know the models must be accurate or in line with what is accurate because we have chemistry. So I know that if I'm going to swish and flick my wand and transfigure something, I have to interact with the molecular construction of that object. So if I were to write a book on the science of magic, it would have to be something like The Extra-Dimensional Excellence of the Witch's Familiar, because I personally cannot interact with these molecules in a way that transfigures them. I would need an intermediary to do that. And according to these books, or this book, not Harry Potter now, the book we're actually reporting on, The Secret History of the World, that interaction has become increasingly more difficult until it becomes non-existent, and we would be living in the non-existent part of our history. If there was magic before there was understanding of molecules, something had to change. In other words, either the molecular state of being is evolving over time, meaning molecules weren't exactly what they are today forever. The molecules themselves are changing. Or I don't have access to the things that I need to interact with them. The familiar. The only real example I can come up with right now anyway for how to show you what is changing is via sex. Don't think it. Anyways, in the secret societies, this guy that wrote the book was not initiated, so he doesn't have access to all the information. And what his impression is it's the most powerful and strongly guarded secrets of their magic. In other words, if they knew the secrets of magic through sex, they weren't telling anybody. But thankfully, we live in a world where we can all still have sex anyway. So if there is magic, and enough people are having sex, and sex is a way to magic, some people are going to start to figure something out here. If you want to talk about the growth of consciousness and sex at the same time, it helps to start by asking yourself a question. How long ago was it that the society you live in considered the female orgasm to be a myth? You can do that Google search on your own. Maybe you already know. Now ask yourself, in how many locations in our societies were the female orgasm simultaneously considered a myth and also being prescribed as remedy for things like stress, that feeling you get when you feel like you could accomplish things, but the society you live in doesn't allow you to even try. How long ago was it that it was both mythical and it had enough benefits that doctors were prescribing it? I don't think they wrote out RXs for this. Once you've answered that question, you can see the growth of consciousness from that point forward. There was a state of inequality. It persists today, but in large part it's being broken down from many, many different angles. There was a clear distinction between male and female. There was clear inequality on both sides, really, because I am not your white knight. I never was going to be your white knight. I never will desire being your white knight. But yet, my society told me that that was my function. I was the supporter. I was the leader. You have to be strong. You were created to be strong. I can't speak to the inequality that the female suffered because I'm male. There are people out there who can speak to that far better than me, and guess what? They don't have dicks. But once that inequality starts, I get it, there's inequality. It is being attacked from many sides, and one of the most important sides for this conversation, which is magic, is the sexual side. I'm sure somewhere in the world it is still considered a myth, but by and large, it's not considered a myth anymore. What did that do for us? How did that advance our consciousness at all? And what the fuck does it have to do with magic? Let me tell you. See, the thing about the female orgasm is, it's sort of like that tip of the iceberg. You don't get anywhere until you realize there's a fucking iceberg there to begin with. You notice it by what is visible. What is visible, apparently some don't see it as visible because there are still plenty of memes and jokes going around about how we can't even find very specific, very obvious, it's right fucking there, parts of the female anatomy. And once we decide, or once we've discovered that it is there is still a large gap in between in how we know how to interact with it. But as this part of inequality gets nibbled away, change happens. So, okay, we've seen the tip of the iceberg. What is that enormous amount of shit underneath? And is encapsulated in that enormous amount of stuff? Is that magic in there? Is that where it's located? Is there enough ways we can pick at this subject until we get close to it? So you discovered that tip of the iceberg. And then you discovered, let's just take a generalized natural progression. You tip of the iceberg, okay, so now there is something new a new way in which I can interact with my partner. And then you discover that it's not altogether the same. There isn't the same level of degree of difficulty between partners. One partner may be very easy to get that beyond that level, and the next partner is just like, no matter how you look at it, no matter what you do, no matter how patient, how forceful, how whatever, you just can't get beyond a certain point. And that is because what is under this iceberg is freaking psychological. All the barriers beyond physical trauma, beyond physical impairment, all of the work that needs to be done here is in the consciousness. All of the terminology that you would use to figure out where this magic is located is all psychological terminology. It is projection. It is vulnerability. It is communication. It is touch. All of these things that you are going to use to analyze the subject matter underneath the water, underneath the surface, is you're going to be using psychological terminology. Okay, so you figure that bit out. And at the same time, you work your physical prowess up into a state where you're actually more familiar. Suddenly, that thing that nobody seemed to know how to find, first off, now we know where it is, and now we know how to use it. And you get better physical capabilities in using it. You become more competent. Not long after that, you discover that some of these things that were mythical before are actually kind of generic. There is a generic quality to most orgasms that you don't figure out without the psychology. And now you're approaching where the magic might be. You've kind of limited your directions, you've gained your focus, you've gained some insight, and you're now chipping away towards where that magic is. The best results when doing this work, you're going to find that there is one magical ingredient that is required in order to grow your knowledge, your consciousness in this subject, and that is vulnerability. If there is any lack of vulnerability, that is your weak spot. That is where you are hampering your growth and understanding. Wherever there is a lack of vulnerability, that's where you need to work. Once you figure that out, you get to something that is a lot different than the standard practice. I'm trying to say this without being pig-headed or arrogant or just... Once you understand that vulnerability and a certain level of physical competence is the key, that connection is required to allow that vulnerability to happen, now you can start talking about focus and flow. I've done videos on focus and flow. Understand that we are now in a sexual situation. We are talking about utilizing focus and flow and being able to do that because we understand insecurity, we understand vulnerability. This is real work. This is idealistic work. The orgasm isn't something you can put in a jar and save for a rainy day. That's not how it works. The materialism of sex is like what Bill Maher calls the masturbation economy. That's, by and large, bullshit sex anyway. There's no magic there. And if that's where the majority of people are, no wonder they don't discover it. But now we're talking about using focus and flow. If I am in a position where my partner and I both have the physical competence, we both have the understanding of the psychological terminology and the work associated with it, and now we can bring focus both on each other and what's happening at the moment while we're together. That's the start of understanding the deep, dangerously guarded secrets of the magic of sex. Now you've got focus. Now you've got mental energies that are actually working for your growth. You're not tail chasing, which I think a lot of bad sex happens because of tail chasing. It's amazing how 2 years ago I might have made a video that talked about focus, flow, and tail chasing, and no matter what subject I bring my mind to bear on, it's still accurate. It's still functionally able to make work progress. Confirmation bias is possible. It's also possible that I'm just fucking right about this. So now you've got focus. If you now have focus and physical competence of some kind, it doesn't matter if you're really good or really bad, you have access to it. And if you're really bad, you have access to all kinds of information that allows you to get better at it. Physical competence part is the easy part. It is far less predetermined on your physiognomy, on what you have to work with than you might think. Everybody watching this has the same brain I have. Same brain. If I can see it, if I can know other people that can see it, then anybody can see it. I'm not special. They're not special. We're all the same thing here. Once you obtain focus in sex, you can obtain flow. I don't know if you watching this have ever achieved flow. Flow is a state of mind where you are no longer tail chasing. Your consciousness is done wrapping things around. You've achieved some focus. You're able to dive down into these things that you're focusing on. Once you achieve focus in sex and then achieve flow, if this materialistic existence we are in has any semblance of magic left in it, that is one hell of a place to find it. Now look, I realize that I am a white heterosexual male. I realize that is not the thing we're focused on in society today. I don't have any judgment for any other kind of lifestyle. I don't have any judgment for the choices you're making. And oddly enough, this work, this very real work, is available no matter what your preferences are. It does not affect. If I liked boys, I could still do this work. It doesn't matter. If I didn't view myself as a boy, but I'm made as a boy, or whatever the hell it is, it doesn't matter. The work is still available. In fact, if I was to say anything about our current society, I would say put off this drug-induced change and surgical change. Because by and large, you're learning what it's like to be what you are from people who are not very good at it. Don't take their word and example that what you are, you're never going to be good at because you think you might be something else. Hell, if you never think you can have success at being what you are, why not try being something else? Why not get a general loathing for what you are? Since you're incapable of succeeding with it, why not idealize becoming something else? Put that shit off. For one thing, look at the growth of consciousness here. Where I live, it wasn't really all that long ago that the female orgasm was considered by and large a myth. And I live in like one of the most advanced places in the world. I am very, very fortunate to have had the luck I've had in my life. And still, it wasn't all that long ago. And in fact, it wasn't all that long ago that the two things coincided. It was both mythical and prescribable. And then that, once you go through the process I just explained, leads to this focus and flow, and you realize that you don't even need to get to the focus and flow to realize that there's a lot more to orgasm than what we thought or what most people think. Then you realize that multiple orgasms are possible, and by and large, that is females. In our current society, in our understanding of it, it is generally speaking the female that has multiple orgasms. And I don't feel like I'm enlightening anybody right now. I don't feel like I'm giving you information you weren't already aware of. Now let me try and give you something that you most likely aren't aware of. The same multiple orgasms that females can have, males can have. You can have them. Not only that, but you can have them, multiple orgasms, and focus and flow simultaneously. And that is just the level of understanding that this dipshit came up with. Okay? That's readily available. It's everywhere you can find it. Maybe the male multiple orgasms isn't everywhere, but I am not special in any way. I may have had to overcome some things, but not something that made it, like, not physical damage, not. The point is, if I and people like me can do it, anybody can do it. It is not a super unrealistic position to find yourself in the context of this discussion, which is magic and the growth of consciousness. So, if I have now illustrated a position where the deepest, darkest, most guarded secrets of secret societies through our history, this is the shit that they tried to keep us from. And they did all the same shit you're going to do. They used mind-altering chemicals. They used rituals. Hopefully you don't go that way. Rituals get a bit sticky, I imagine. And as Dave Chappelle put it, the best way to ruin an orgy is to just wait for it to get quiet and then just and orgy ruined. Anyways, or everybody laughs if they know the joke. Well, I've never fucking been in one, so what the hell do I know, right? Stay away from the ritual. It's a we've hardened into materialism anyway, so the rituals are probably the part that works the least anyhow. There can be arguments made for the mind-altering chemicals. I prefer pot. But fuck the rituals. So if this, maybe I haven't completely discovered the magic, because I clearly cannot interact with the molecules that objects are made of. But according to their history in this book, I shouldn't be able to, because it's hardened into materialism. What this leads me to is the conclusion. I have said that I'm all about, I'm open to the idea that there have been secret societies. I am open to the idea that they have had a controlling interest on what happens on this planet. It doesn't matter to me, and I don't really think it matters to us. To be quite honest, I don't think it matters at all. I don't think, if they had influence, I think that influence is shattered and gone. Their predictive ability could not have kept up with the pace that we are following at now. They didn't see Bill Gates coming. He was in his garage and he made this thing. Nobody fucking saw what Bill Gates saw. He saw software, and everybody else is like, fuck software, we make shit. Nobody saw that coming. I don't think the secret societies in any way could have kept pace. But I think they have, if they existed, if this was in any way an accurate representation of the secret history of our world, then there are places on this planet where there is a storehouse of past information. I mentioned before that information that was in this book, while giving some confirmation bias, there were some other things that just popped finally into place, like the book of Job. That made no sense to me. Without understanding what the work is, you don't understand what the benefit of that was. So it means that if they existed, or do exist today, that there are storehouses of information like that. Like the idea that the story of Job was the first time the idea, the meme, that life is not fair entered into our consciousness. Dude, that book makes so much more sense to me now. I understand why it would have been done. I understand why it would have been done the way it was done. It makes perfect sense now. You have a storehouse, if you exist, of that kind of information, where things hit, how they grew, how they moved out. If you have that information, that shit needs to be cataloged, it needs to be cross-sectioned, it needs to be understood. Because now we understand, maybe you guys always did, maybe not, but now we understand how our consciousness functions. That is crucial data. Sit on it and save it if you want, but it could be very, very fucking useful. Other than that, I'm pretty sure you're irrelevant to us. And maybe you will be for this big 7,000 year period where we're in this materialism. Maybe you won't matter until the latter 3,500 years. I don't fucking know. It's none of my business. It's not even my work. My work is the growth of consciousness. And that data, maybe I am a little bit like, hey, if there is a storehouse of that data, I'd really like to see the breakdown of that. What happened, where, how, why, and where, how was it dispersed to the rest of consciousness? I don't know if that knowledge, if that data exists, but I would really love to see it. Don't tap me on the shoulders, just fucking publish it. Hell, it doesn't matter. In other words, the magic that they claim existed while we were more idealistic, less materialistic, that magic does not exist anymore. If you can get yourself to a place where their deepest, darkest, most guarded secrets are kept, which is sex, according to these people, and at the same time, that gateway is the gateway to understanding what magic may have transformed into, does that mean that by understanding it, see, this is the best I can do for you right now in showing you the difference between idealism and materialism. All the gains you're going to get from the work in trying to search out and find and understand this kind of magic, those are all idealism. That's the idea matters or is more real than the materialistic. There's nothing materialistic about this except for where it's shit. This is real work. It sounds odd to say, and I suppose maybe the best argument against sex being real work is, no, it's not. I mean, that's probably the best fucking argument you can make, because I live in a world where it certainly seems not to matter. It's everywhere, and what is everywhere generally sucks. This might be the single best argument to argue for monogamy or monogamous forms of sexual relations. Why the fuck weren't you using that? Okay, let me get off this subject, because I have decided in my work that I believe intellect or the idea and intellect came before the creation. I believe creation. I don't think anybody's gotten it right. I think we've missed the point, but I believe that the intellect was there before the material was there. I believe that intellect has a purpose, a goal, a project they are working on. I believe that we could be part of that project, and if so, that project is our consciousness, not our spirituality, not how much money we make or how much money we tithe or how good we are to our neighbors. That work is the growth of our consciousness. Why haven't you made this argument? Your argument all along, as far as I can tell, was You have to act, you have to behave this way because it says right here that you need to do it. It never says this is the work. It never says this is why we said to do it this way. It always says do it because if you don't do it, you're fucking evil. You're sinning. You're wrong. That argument, I believe it was probably necessary for a long time, but it is increasingly becoming vulnerable. Especially when you understand that this kind of work is out there. Why don't you use this work, the progress that this work can bring, to solidify your argument? Because you don't understand what the work is. Anyways, so now, the closest example I can come to showing you in a way you can discover for yourself that concept of magic is through this. If the growth of consciousness is the work, the understanding and growth of consciousness, if that's the work, and if this is an incredible way into finding that work and understanding it, because once you start getting flow during that, you really kind of just have to try this for yourself. The way in which you approach problems, the way in which you find solutions is not the same as when we're going about our daily business. Having that focus, that flow, and I don't know what you call it. I guess calling it sexual energy seems like generic, like it's making it generic. Because most sexual energy in the world is fucking generic. But if this is the way that allows you, if it's the only way I can tell you so that you can go out and find it for yourself, what does that say about the growth of our consciousness? What does that say about the actual work that is being done? What is it that is ahead of my mind? What is it that because I always tell you that if I have a problem advancing a theory or advancing a notion, it's almost always size defeating me. That is the block I need to get past. What is up ahead? If we are at this time in our history where the floodgates have opened and we are now pursuing the growth of our consciousness, or at least some of us are, what is coming next? Can we get past, can we use this understanding right here? Because imagine a world where no longer are you just, it's like when I was growing up as a young male, a lot of significance was placed on conquest. How many girls you could sleep with, how much sex were you having. And it was, generally speaking, just, it certainly wasn't magic. What happens when you change that dynamic enough to where that's no longer the thing? Because now we've got sort of, I'm not a kid. I don't want to argue about where the world's at. So in this regard, because I've been out of this game for a long time and I have no interest in getting back in this game. But how is that changing? If more people are actually finding a way to hit focus and flow and then drill down on problems they're dealing with, how does that broaden our scope? Now, I see a lot of problems in this world and a lot of distraction. We have these enormous problems to deal with. It would be great if we could just say, hey, what if magic exists and we could just swish and flick our way through it? What if that magic actually does exist? Only it isn't what we think what we fantasize it to be. It's actually the ability to connect, use focus, and flow. That is your source. That is your way in the door to stopping all of this constant tail chasing and rat run of thoughts and allowing yourself to grow. And if I tell you that you could get there through sex, maybe more people will. So in conclusion, I don't think you're relevant, but I'd like to see your data. If there is a secret history of the world, I think that pretty much sums you up right now. Maybe you don't actually know if you exist, because I'm just going to go with the idea that they exist. It doesn't really matter, but if you do exist out there, I don't think you had the way to properly formulate the questions that allow you to predict what's coming next. And even if you did get lucky in that, which seems highly unlikely by the direction just of what I see in the world, it seems like you're missing the point too. And if that is the case, your irrelevancy is dangerous. When there's no focus, you don't generally tend to do things that work out well. On a side note, I have been dreading talking about sex for as long as I've been making these things. Now I realize you look at my channel and you're like, what, fucking 30 videos? What are you talking about? You haven't been making these. I don't come to these when with just by random things of the day. I think there have been like a few of those, but I usually delete those. I don't come here to become famous, to become wealthy, to become influential. I wait until I think I've found a way to explain something. And then I've made this video several times. And I've deleted all of them before because I can't find the way to communicate them. This isn't something that comes natural to me. I'm not looking to be great. Well, and the things I try to do, like I think I'm a great painter. I think I'm a great lover. But I don't want to be great here. It's not my goal. I've dreaded talking about this subject because on one hand, it attracts attention, and attracting attention is detrimental to the success of my work. On the other hand, it's hard to discuss the subject and be decent, respectable, not dirty or disgusting. And I don't think there's enough people dealing with the subject of sex that have those limitations on them. And maybe things might get a little bit less generic and shitty if you did. Anyways, I hope I pulled it off without. I mean, I get it. If you're a dude watching this, you're like, dude, tell me more about how I get to have multiple orgasms like my girl. I don't yet know how to say that without being something I don't want to be. Maybe I will someday in the future. Maybe I will figure out how to give that. But for right now, it's not something I'm focused on. I'm more focused on the aspect of it as being a conduit towards better understanding. I realize like I'm going to have co-workers and friends watching this, and I'm going to be like, I can just imagine the amount of shit I'm going to catch. Let's just say that. Like right now I'm making the thing and I'm wondering, should I even put hashtags on this motherfucker? Because yeah, I don't want that attention. It's a tough subject, but it's worth touching on because it is a way into this focus and this flow and this ability to stop stagnating your own consciousness. We live in a world that is built to stagnate our consciousness. And sex has been built in this world for the last, I don't know, let's say 40 years, 50 years, let's just say half a century. It has been gradually building in awareness, openness, and certainly in commercialization. And it seems to me to be growing into this thing that has little benefit to us. I hope I helped you out in that regard. That was my goal.